Try to think a complex thought without using any words. Go ahead, try it. Try to plan out your week, or remember an argument you had without a single word forming in your head. You can't, can you? Your entire inner world, your thoughts, your memories, your sense of who you are, is stitched together out of language. Now imagine living without it, not just staying quiet, having no words at all, not in your mouth and not in your mind. That was the reality for our ancestors for most of human existence. For hundreds of thousands of years, humans survived, cooperated, hunted, raised children, and conquered a hostile planet with little or no language as we know it. And how they pulled that off is one of the strangest and most overlooked stories of who we are. Here's the first thing to understand, and it's the part that breaks most people's assumptions. Language did not arrive all at once. There was no single moment where a caveman suddenly opened his mouth and started speaking in sentences. In fact, we don't even know when language really began, and I want to be honest with you about that because it matters. Scientists genuinely disagree, and the estimates are wildly far apart. Some argue the capacity for language existed over 100,000 years ago. Others make the case that full grammatical language, the kind you're using to understand me right now, may only be 20,000 years old. A few trace its roots back over 2 million years. That is an enormous range. The truth is, nobody knows for certain. Language leaves almost no trace in the fossil record. Words don't fossilize. So we are detectives working from the faintest of clues. But here is what we can say with far more confidence. For the vast stretch of time before spoken language, our ancestors were not silent, and they were certainly not helpless. They had other ways to reach each other's minds, and the first and maybe most important was the body. Think about how you communicate right now, even with all your words. You point, you nod, you raise your eyebrows, you wince, you smile, you shrug. Now strip away the words, and you're left with something that still carries a huge amount of meaning. This is where it likely began. Our early ancestors, like the apes we're related to, were rich communicators through gesture and expression. A raised hand, a bared set of teeth, a point toward the horizon, a gesture that says, danger, or come here, or look there. And there's a beautiful clue for why gesture may have come first. Millions of years ago, our ancestors stood up. They became bipedal, walking on two legs. And that single change did something no one planned. It freed the hands. Hands that were no longer needed for walking could now be used to signal, to point, to shape meaning in the air. Your ability to wave someone over or point at something across a field may be one of the oldest forms of human communication there is. Older perhaps than a single spoken word. Now add sound to that. Not words, but sound. A sharp cry of alarm. A low, soothing hum to a frightened child. Different calls for different threats, the way many animals still warn each other today. Combine urgent gestures with urgent sounds, and you already have a powerful system for staying alive together, without a grammar, without a dictionary, without a single sentence. But survival needed more than warnings and pointing. It needed something much harder. It needed teaching. And this is where the story gets genuinely astonishing, because our ancestors were making tools, complex ones, stone blades that had to be struck from a rock in exactly the right way, at exactly the right angle, in a precise sequence of steps. Get it wrong, and you have a useless chunk of rock. This is a skill that has to be taught. It cannot be reinvented from scratch by every single person. So how do you teach someone to make a razor-sharp blade when you don't share a language? You show them. You sit beside them, and you demonstrate, slowly, deliberately. You guide their hands. You point at the angle. You act out the strike. You correct their mistakes with a shake of the head or a nudge. This is teaching through pantomime and imitation, and it is a form of communication so powerful that it carried the most important survival knowledge of the species across hundreds of thousands of years and countless generations. Think about what that really means. The exact technique for making a blade, a skill it might take a lifetime to master, was handed down across 100 generations without anyone ever writing it down or saying it aloud. The knowledge of how to make the tools that kept everyone alive was passed hand to hand, body to body, without needing a single written or spoken word. So the picture we're building is of a species that was deeply, richly connected, long before it could speak. They warned each other with cries. They coordinated with gesture. They taught with their hands and bodies. They understood each other through the oldest channels there are: the face, the voice, the body in motion. And slowly, over an unimaginable stretch of time, sound began to take on more of the load. Somewhere along the way, the human body itself was changing to make speech possible. The larynx, the voice box, shifted lower in the throat, opening up a wider range of sounds we could produce. In the neck, a small structure called the hyoid bone, which anchors the muscles of the tongue, took on a shape suited to speech. We've even found hyoid bones from Neanderthals, tens of thousands of years old, shaped remarkably like our own, a tantalizing hint that they too may have had some capacity for complex sound. Piece by piece, gesture and cry and grunt were joined by something new: deliberate sounds that stood for things. A sound that meant water, a sound that meant fire, a sound that meant danger. And once you can attach a sound to an idea and then string those sounds together, you have crossed the threshold into something world-changing. You have language, and language changed everything, because for the first time you could talk about things that weren't right in front of you. The hunt tomorrow, the river 2 valleys over, a person who had died, an idea that had never existed until you spoke it into the air. But it's worth sitting with the humility in all of this. We are reconstructing the invisible. We can't dig up a gesture. We can't excavate the first word. We're piecing together the story of how humans learned to reach each other's minds from bones, tools, and our best understanding of how communication works. Much of it remains a genuine mystery, and honest scientists will tell you exactly that. Still, when you step back, the picture is breathtaking. For most of our story, we held each other together without words. We survived the wilderness, raised our young, and passed down everything we knew using nothing but our hands, our faces, and our voices. Every warning cry that saved a life. Every patient demonstration that taught a child to survive. Every gesture that said, "I'm here, come with me, watch out." That was the real foundation, not grammar, connection. So the next time a word forms effortlessly in your mind, remember that it rests on an unimaginably long inheritance of people who had no words at all and who reached each other anyway. They didn't need language to be human. They were already reaching for each other. Language was just the moment we finally spoke it out loud.